Hello, good evening. So, I'm supposed to engage you tomorrow at 10, but I don't think I'll be able to do that because the last leg of admissions to your program is scheduled for tomorrow. So, there are some 6 candidates taking admission tomorrow, 6 students. So, I'll be busy with that throughout the day. So I thought I'll give you a very brief lecture. Just instead of calling it a lecture, I'm just talking to you, okay, about your course, History of English in general, and a few other things. All right. So let's start at the beginning. What's the good of doing a course like this, History of English? എന്താണ് ഇതിൻ്റെ ഒരു മെച്ചം? ഇത് ചെയ്യുന്നതുകൊണ്ട് എന്താ ഗുണം ഉണ്ടാകുന്നത്? So these are questions which everybody asks. Okay. So as you are probably aware, there are no very clear-cut answers. Okay. But there are answers. Right. So what are they? So let's go to the contemporary concept of outcome-based education. So you must think of an outcome before you introduce any course. What is this course going to do? What is this program going to do? Okay, would you get employment immediately after you come out from your college or university, finishing this course, or completing your MA in English language and literature program? So for MA in English language and literature, you know that it is definitely an employable program. Okay, you can definitely become a teacher if you have a net besides your MA in English language and literature. And of course, you can go for B.Ed and settle down to become a school teacher. All this is possible. Okay. So, but I am talking about History of English as a course within this program called English MA in English Language and Literature. So, what good is this course? Okay. Let's see. For one, it definitely deepens your understanding of language. So this also means it definitely qualifies you more for your future life, because language is everything. You can't think of human life without language. You can't think of any activity in which language doesn't mediate. Okay, so any new understanding of language certainly helps you in your social life, in whatever endeavor that you're going to do, in however small a manner. Okay. So when we are talking about history of English, we are talking about the history of one particular language. All right. So, but when you talk about one particular language, you're also talking about its ancestors. Where did English come from? Which family does it belong to? How did it become the English that we know today? All these are interesting questions. Okay. And when you learn, when you try to understand, when you try to get to the bottom of these questions, you have a number of new things coming up. One, for example, is how does a language change? And what are the factors that influence such a change? Okay. 2, can a language exist in isolation? Can a language exist in isolation from its neighbors? What will be the fate of such a language, which is completely uninfluenced by other languages? Or is a language better off when it is influenced by other languages? I do believe that any language is better off when it is influenced by other languages, when it is very heavily influenced by other languages. Take Malayalam, for example. Okay. What will be the state of Malayalam today if it hadn't been influenced by first Sanskrit, Tamil, and then of course English, and a number of other languages including Arabic. So cultural richness, variety that we experience today can be the result of influx from other languages and other cultures. This is very important. This conveys an important message on cultural plurality, on cultural democracy. Okay, so this is one thing. Two, when you learn the history of a language like English, you also find that as you dig deeper and deeper, for instance, we know that history belongs to a family called Indo-European. So why is it called Indo-European? Although English is often called a European language, it's always called a European language. It belongs to a family which is called Indo-European. This is because Indian languages like Hindi or Bangla or Punjabi are also Indo-European languages. So the family which we call Indo-European stretches a long distance away from Europe. And the people who spoke the Indo-European family of languages, the majority of the people who speak the Indo-European languages today live in India. So the Indo-European family is spread out in Europe and Asia, besides the continents to which its speakers migrated. English is spoken in America, Spanish is spoken in America, Portuguese is spoken in America, French is spoken in Americas. I'm talking about the continents. Okay, English is spoken in Australia. So people who spoke the Indo-European languages have migrated and settled in all parts of the world. So the Indo-European family is today a truly global family. Okay, so what does this mean again? It means that a language can migrate. It can settle in new terrains. It can seek new worlds. So this cultural diffusion, this cultural plurality, this influence that one language exerts over another is very important. It deepens our understanding. Also, a number of other things, like when you learn the history of English, you find that English is not just one English. There are many Englishes. The varieties of English spoken even within a small country called Britain. Not to speak about the varieties spoken in America, the varieties spoken in the West Indies, the varieties spoken in Australia. So this means that a language itself is a multicultural, multi-regional entity. An important message we get from this is that you cannot impose your language on anybody. You can't think of one variety of language as superior to another. For example, one variety of Malayalam as superior to another. There are, as we know, a number of Malayalams, not one Malayalam. Okay. And in a film like Trivandrum Lodge, we get samples of many Malayalams. Malayalam spoken in Kasaragod, Malayalam spoken in Kozhikode, Malayalam spoken in Malappuram, Malayalam spoken in Ernakulam, the Malayalam spoken in Thiruvananthapuram. Okay. So language variety, language policy. How do we look at English as a language? And we learn, for instance, that for a long time English was subservient to French. French was the dominant language in Britain, So what does this mean? This means the spread of a language, its status is determined not by any intrinsic merit. So English is today an international language not because it's a better language than Malayalam. Definitely not. It's an international language with a wider spread than Malayalam because it is the language of power. It has been the language of power for more than 3 centuries, since the middle of the 18th century. Okay. nearly 3 centuries. Okay, that's because the British Empire once stretched across the globe. Okay, you've heard of the saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Yeah, so everywhere from the eastern end of the globe, the international date line, eastern side of the international date line to the western end of the international date line, you can hear English spoken. Because they were conquerors. Okay, they were conquerors and rulers. And many people, many linguists say that there are other languages which have produced better literatures than English. French, for instance. There are many other languages which are capable of more picturesque expression than English. Languages in which more philosophy has been written. German, for instance. So English is in no way superior to other languages, superior to our own Malayalam. It's only because English happened to be the language of the people who ruled a large part of the world that it has risen to the kind of predominance that it holds today. Okay, so these are some of the important things that we learn, and which are very useful for us in our social dealings. Okay, so we would definitely learn that we shouldn't look down upon other people's language, that we shouldn't consider the dialect spoken in Malappuram as inferior to the dialect spoken in Thiruvananthapuram or Ernakulam. They are simply dialects, and the reason why one dialect is more powerful, holds a better status in any society, is that it has power behind it. So people who have power impose their language on other people. People who have power consider their dialect or language superior. This is what happens. Okay, so these are some of the outcomes, possible outcomes, deepening your understanding about this very important phenomenon called language. Alright, so we'll also learn certain other interesting things as we go along. What do you think about the history of languages? What about the more than 7,000 languages spoken in the world today? Some of them are becoming extinct, okay, with very few speakers, such as some of the languages in the Andaman Islands, okay, our own country, our own territory. So languages spoken by just 10 or 15 people. Tribes which are dying out. So when the members of the tribe die out, the language also dies. Okay. But other languages have managed to survive. They will probably survive. Malayalam definitely will not die out. So it's a powerful language spoken by more than 35 million people, 3.5 crore people. Alright. So look at these 7,000 languages of the world. How many families are they split up into? What is the current take on how these languages evolved? So one important theory, which is more or less widely accepted today, is that all the languages of the world have evolved from one language. Very interesting, isn't it? Because the Bible says that all human beings once upon a time spoke the same language. And God was jealous of human beings. Why? Because human beings attempted to build a tower which they thought will reach heaven. Definitely God was jealous. So it would actually destroy God's isolation, okay, making human beings very powerful. So what did God do? He confused their languages. Instead of one language, he made people speak many languages. They didn't understand it. This is a story from the Bible. Okay. So, the story which is more probable is this, told by some genetists, people who look at human genes, and anthropologists. They found that all human beings on earth today, whether they are Africans, Asians, or Europeans, or Australians, or Americans, they have evolved from the same tribe which lived in Africa about 70,000 to 1 lakh years ago, 100,000 years ago. A tribe which lived in the western part of, lived in the southwestern part of Africa, near the Kalahari Desert. Okay, they migrated out of Africa and spread in all parts of the world. Okay, I think I have mentioned the Indo-European family of languages. The speakers of Hindi or Bangla are actually migrants, the descendants of the migrants who came from Europe and Central Asia. All right, we know that. So this theory says that the small tribe in Africa, which probably did not number more than 10,000, not now, not 1,000 years ago, but 70,000 to 1 lakh years ago. They migrated out of Africa because the conditions were bad in Africa. There was no rain, vegetation did not grow, and because there was no vegetation, there were fewer animals to hunt. So they faced a serious crisis, and they migrated out of Africa in search of food. And on the way, they fed themselves on sea animals and fish, shellfish and other animals. You can find the deposits of bones and shells across the coast of Africa and most parts of Asia. The route these people migrated through into Asia and Europe. Okay, so this is what anthropologists have found, and there is evidence to show that the original people who migrated out of Africa had language. So don't think that human beings had language from the very beginning. When they evolved out of other animals, apes, according to the theory of evolution. Language was something which human beings or Homo sapiens perfected later. Okay. Anyway, the people who migrated out of Africa had language. So if they had language, they already had language, all the languages of the world have evolved from this proto-language. You will learn more about it. This language is called Khoisa, Khoisa. The Khoisa is actually the name of the language which is spoken in this area now, near the Kalahari Desert. And both linguists and anthropologists believe that this modern language, contemporary language, is a direct descendant of the original language spoken in Africa 70,000 to 1 lakh years ago. So here you are, very clear evidence. And evidence is available from human genes. They have examined the genetic makeup of all tribes and races of men, people living in all parts of the world, and they have found very important similarities, which establish that they are all related to these first migrants who came out of Africa and settled in all parts of the world during the last 70,000 years ago. So this original language split up into many languages, many large language families, one of which is Indo-European, the parent of English. Okay, so our own language, Malayalam, all of us speak Malayalam. What about Malayalam? Malayalam is a language which has evolved from the Proto-Dravidian family. You know, it's a Dravidian language. What are the other major Dravidian languages? Yes, Tamil, Kannada, Telugu. But very close to us, there is a fifth Dravidian language, Tulu, spoken in parts of Kasaragod district and Mangalore district in Karnataka. Fifth Dravidian, because earlier people used to say Panchadravidam, Anju Dravida Bhashagal. But today we know that there are more Dravidian languages. Okay. There are languages like Kuruk and Kui, spoken by tribes in central India, in Madhya Pradesh, parts of Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, etc. But there is another interesting piece of news. There is a Dravidian language which is spoken in parts of Pakistan and Afghanistan. A language spoken by about 3.5 million people. That's a big number, Tulu is spoken by only about 5 to 10 lakh people. But this language called Brahvi, it is spelled Brahui, also Brahvi. So Brahvi or Brahvi is spoken in the border areas of Afghanistan and Pakistan by about 3.5 million. They have their own newspaper, they have a radio and TV station, and it's probably not used in schools, but it's a very powerful language. Our distant relative. So how did Brahvi come to Pakistan and Afghanistan? It came from the Mediterranean region. Both linguists and anthropologists and also genetists say that the original Dravidian family belonged to the Mediterranean region, coast of Africa and parts of Europe, where the two continents meet. And our ancestors, Dravidians, came all the way to India from this area. And on the way, some of them stayed back in places like Iran. There are dialects of Brahvi spoken in Iran also. Not so many as you find in the border areas of Afghanistan and Pakistan, but quite a few people speak this dialect. Not as many, but let us say roughly 100,000 to 200,000 people in Iran. So this is how languages migrate all over the world. So when we are looking at English, its history, we are looking at where it came from, which parent family, which language family it belonged to, how did it change, what are the ways in which languages change, how does the same language differ as you move across a region, as you move from Kozhikode to let us say Ramanattukara, already you find a difference in the Malayalam spoken. Same thing happens if you move out of London in Britain. If you move out to a county called Yorkshire, you will find that people will say not much, M-U-C-H, they will say much. They will say run, R-U-N, instead of run. So our Rahul Dravid, for example, would have scored 130 centuries, or how many? 30,000, not 30,000, 3,000 runs, not runs. So the same word, such a common word like run or much, its pronunciation changes as you travel just about 100 kilometers. And one famous commentator called Geoffrey Boycott insisted on using his Yorkshire dialect. He used to say much or run instead of much or run. Same thing with Malayalam. When you move across, in Vadagara, people say enak. And if you move slightly into the north, in Talacheri, people will pronounce it as anak. The vowel changes, the first vowel changes, So this is how languages differ, differing across territory, differing across class. Working class. Workers will use a variety of English, and the upper class would use another variety of English. Register. Fishermen would use one kind of English, and businessmen in London would use another. Artisans in London would use one kind of English. So language variety, language superiority, language, status of language, all these are important social questions. So as you study the history of language, definitely you are going to address these things, okay, which are actually very vital in your understanding of not only language but human culture, how human beings use language, okay. What are the ways in which language is constructed? What are the ways in which language varieties rise? What are the ways in which one language influences the other? So today we speak about English as the most predominant language in the world. But just a century and a half ago, okay, sometime in the 18th century, okay, French was the more popular language in Europe, So the characters in Tolstoy's novel, Anna Karenina, the people in the palace, including the Princess Anna, spoke French just to show off, like people speaking English today, to show off that they are more knowledgeable, more learned, more educated. French was the language of prestige, not very long ago. Okay, and it's also notable that for nearly 3 centuries, French was the ruling language in Britain, from the early 11th century to the end of the 14th century, when the Normans ruled Britain, England. So we are going to look at that also. What happened? How did the French rule England and impose their language on England? Okay. We'll also learn, interestingly, that 50% of the words in English, more than 50% perhaps, come from French. Yeah, that's why French and English are the closest languages culturally in Europe. Okay, I'm saying culturally because genetically English belongs to the Germanic family. Okay, it has a very close relationship with German and Dutch. Okay, language spoken in Holland. But French, though it belongs to another subfamily, the Germanic family is a subfamily of the Indo-European family I was telling you about. And French belongs to the Latin family or Italic family. Okay, slightly distant from each other, but both belonging to the Indo-European family. So French is the language that has influenced English more than German. Although genetically it's like two cousins, They are related genetically. But probably one of the cousin lives with another family. Okay. Or one of the cousins is influenced by members of another family, neighbors, but not related by blood. So the second cousin will show more characteristics of the family with which he or she was associated for a long time, rather than to members of his own family. So this happens to languages also. So one language being influenced by another. Okay, very closely influenced by another and changing its character. Yeah, like people changing their character when they fall under the influence of others. Languages also change their character. Yeah. So a language like English, which used to have long compounds, okay, 3 or 4 words put together. After it came under the influence of French, it gave up this habit. Compounds are not very large in English. You can at best combine 3 words. But in German, it's close cousin. You can combine 15 or 20 words. I'll show you examples when we discuss it in detail. So you can have a large word. So can you, for instance, say, okay, I'm talking about a teacher in the department. Okay, so teacher English department, Calicut University, Malabar, Kerala. So can you have all these as a single word? But it's possible in German. Okay, not in this order perhaps, but starting with Kerala, for example. You can have a compound word like that in German, but not in English, not in French. Okay, so by taking up this course on history of English, you come to learn a number of principles of language evolution, language change, language influence, which in turn tells you about how human cultures work, how our attitudes to languages, our attitudes to dialects are influenced by historical factors. Why we can it helps you develop a more democratic attitude towards languages and dialects. Okay, languages and dialects are things which we should look at impassionately, scientifically. Okay, so you will learn not to look down upon people who are using a dialect which you consider inferior. Their language, their dialect is as good as yours. Their dialect has evolved in similar lines as your dialect. Okay, and the power that a language wields, the status that a language enjoys, has nothing to do with its merit. It has everything to do with the power the speakers of the language wielded. ഓക്കെ, സോ ഇതൊക്കെയാണ് ഞാൻ അടുത്ത ക്ലാസ്സുകളിൽ പറയാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പം നിങ്ങൾക്ക് യു ക്യാൻ ഹാവ് എ ലുക്ക് അറ്റ് സം ഓഫ് ദ മെറ്റീരിയൽസ് ഐ സെൻഡ് യു ടുഡേ. ഐ സെൻഡ് ദ മെറ്റീരിയൽസ് ടു ദി ഗ്രൂപ്പ്. വാട്ട്സ് വി ക്യാൻ ഹാവ് എ ലുക്ക് ആൻഡ് വി ക്യാൻ ഡിസ്കസ് തിങ്സ് ഫർദർ നെക്സ്റ്റ് വീക്ക്. ഓക്കെ, ആൻഡ് അനദർ ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റിംഗ് തിങ് അബൌട്ട് this course is probably you need only some help from me. Lots of material is available everywhere, and some of them make very interesting reading. Okay, so in some cases you may not be able to put down the book or stop watching a video. Okay, very interesting videos are available. Okay, of people talking, such as a man and a woman talking in English, one of them using the British form of English and the other the American. Yeah, and the man would speak in British English, the woman would reply in American English. It's a very funny video. I'll show you sometime. So these two varieties of time. Bernard Shaw said that the English in America, America and Britain are two countries divided by the same language. Not by different languages. Okay. The same language, but it's the varieties are so different that it divides the people in Britain and America. So we are going to look at all these. Okay. So bye till next week. Good evening.